This clip is brought to you by SaveWithConrad.com.
Let's talk about the match itself here. It got 3.5 stars in the Observer. Mysterio gets a huge ring entrance. He's even got the band POD playing his entrance music. He's got this big Mayan headdress. It's a coming out party for Mysterio. What do you think of the live bands playing the entrance themes? Was that something you thought was a cool touch or sort of unnecessary?
That's what Wrestlemania is all about. And I don't blame Rey for doing that. It was his night. He was winning the world title. The only issue was it went so long. You know, we had like 21 minutes for our match, including entrances. And the entrance was pretty long as it was. So my entrance was 2 minutes. Randy's was 2 minutes. Ray's had to be 8 minutes. So, you know, you add that together, that's 12 minutes. We only had 9 minutes to wrestle one of the co-main events of WrestleMania. So we had to cut a lot of stuff. It was a really difficult match to do. And especially in a triple threat match, it's really hard to cut stuff out because you have to have all three people in unison with each other, knowing what's going on next.
How would you adjust for that? Did you know ahead of time the entrance has 8 minutes? Did you discover that in walkthroughs, or do you have a match built, but once you're in the ring, you realize, oh shit, we don't have time for all this now?
That's what happened when Ray came out and his entrance. He came out to the stage and then he went up a scaffold and went to the top of the Titantron. He's up there dancing around with his costume on. And comes back down. Comes down, celebrates, goes around the ring, gets in the ring, does his entrance. It seemed like forever. And the only thing I'm thinking is we're not going to have enough time. And we didn't. So we had to cut some stuff out, and we actually sped the match up. It was a higher paced match because of that.
Yeah, I can only imagine what's going through your mind there.
I don't blame Ray. Don't forget, this was Rey Mysterio's night. This was his first world title. And, you know, he was doing it for Eddie. So I don't blame Ray for that. I think that it was a great idea. I just wish we would have known beforehand.
Do you remember who the agent was for that match that night?
The agent was either Pat Patterson or Johnny Laurinaitis. They're both very exceptional. So I'm not sure which one it was.
It's a fast-paced, excellent match with an abrupt finish. Orton hits Angle with a belt shot. Mysterio comes off the ropes, but Orton hits him with a backdrop. Orton's behind Mysterio, and then Angle gets behind Orton and lifts, basically German suplexing Orton, who in turn threw Mysterio into orbit. It's probably one of the most recognizable spots of the match. Who came up with that idea? Was that one of you guys or maybe Pat's?
It was my idea, but Ray with the innovative way of getting into it, where he came out of the corner, did a wheelbarrow kind of move with Randy, where Randy, his legs went around Randy's waist and Randy lifted him up, set him back on his feet. And I got behind Randy and then we just went together and I Germaned both of them. And Ray flew like all the way across the ring. It was a really cool spot, but it was my idea, but Ray came up with the innovative way of doing it.
At one point, Mysterio being thrown into a Hurricane Rana onto Orton. And now the crowd is chanting, "Let's go Angle." And they turn on Mysterio and they start booing his offense. They're even booing his attempt at his finisher, which is the 619. And they're cheering when you do the ankle lock, just like we saw on TV. Mysterio's tapping, but Orton has the referee, Charles Robinson, distracted. So Charles misses it. Then you try the ankle lock on Orton and Orton's tapping, but now Mysterio has Charles distracted. Orton hits the RKO on you, but you kick out. And it says here that Angle was being booked at Superman since he was losing the title. You did the belly to belly off the top rope on Orton. Mysterio nails you with the 619, and then he does the springboard Thez press, but you kick out, and then you do the Angle slam on Orton for a near fall. Mysterio knocks you out of the ring and does a 619 on Orton, and then a springboard Hurricane Rana for the pin. And the crowd has booed you, or booed Mysterio rather, the entire match. But then when he wins, they cheer, although maybe not the way it should have been. That's the report from the Observer. My take on that has always been sometimes fans will have their favorites and they'll boo and they'll cheer. But if something major happens, like a title change, they'll cheer because they witnessed something important. Does that make sense?
Yes, I just think that was the preference that night. Chicago can be a little bit of a different crowd. They kind of beat to or dance to the beat of a different drum. They're not typical fans. They respond differently, and they were behind Kurt Angle that night. They just wanted to see Kurt Angle dominate and win. And Ray, it was disappointing to see that happen to Ray because it's never happened to him before. And he's such a strong baby face, and you would think that anybody would cheer for Ray to win the match. But I was making my way back as babyface, and I think the fans wanted Kurt Angle to retain the title that night in Chicago.
Let's talk a little bit about that because, and I know we're going to talk about this more in the future, but it does feel like Vince McMahon had to come around and almost be sold on the idea that Rey Mysterio could be one of his top guys and world champion. But then he obviously acquiesces. We have the right story here with the tribute to Eddie. And even after, the match, we see Chavo and Vicky Guerrero coming out to congratulate him. So it is a feel-good moment. But I can't help but wonder, had this match and his big moment happened anywhere other than Chicago, do you think Ray's reign may have went a little differently? Because the celebration and the reaction from the crowd doesn't feel like maybe what you expected based on the story. And I just wonder how much of that was Chicago just having their favorites and their own sort of attitude towards the performers.
I think it had a lot to do with it because, like I said before, Rey Mysterio has never been booed out of a building.
Right.
And this was a first time for him. And I think that Vince McMahon saw that as, oh, okay, maybe Ray isn't quite as over as I thought he was.
Right.
And I think that might have affected Ray's title run. But the whole on Eddie Guerrero and his remembrance. So, Ray winning the title, nobody was going to stop that. And that was the right decision because Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio deserved it.
Meltzer would write, while Mysterio was booed during his match, he was not booed at winning. He couldn't be booed afterwards since he broke down and cried while being congratulated by Chavo and Vicky. But the reaction was nowhere near what was expected. Part of the reason was it was such a pro-Angle crowd, but also the match was too short and the people hadn't been drawn in at a deep level to explode at the outcome. Mysterio, Angle, and Orton were going in the direction of having a classic WrestleMania match when, with no build, Mysterio pinned Orton. The people simply weren't ready to pop big. There's a lot to unpack with what Meltzer says there. Perhaps you did Ray a disservice by putting Kurt Angle in the match since the fans were so for him. He can't just be the sort of standalone babyface. Maybe it should have been against two heels. And yeah, maybe the entrance or the placement on the card hurt it because these WrestleMania shows were loaded. Do you think in hindsight we should have shortened the entrance, or should you guys have, or could you have just gone long? And I know that I'm asking something silly here, but Shawn Michaels had a reputation, and so did Triple H, for they're going to go as long as they want to. And I realize that's because they're Shawn and Triple H, but had you gone long and the match was well received, would it have been disastrous when you walk back through the curtain? Is there really like a two sets of rules, one for Shawn and Triple H, one for everybody else, or was that not an option?
Well, I just never made it an option. I always tried to end my matches on time because that's what I was told. The only match that I ever went over on was my match with Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 21. So I think that, and to some degree, those guys are on a different level and they have a better understanding with Vince that they're going to go long. They might have the reputation of doing that, but I didn't want that reputation. I wanted to be a team player and make sure that I ended up on time.
Mysterio's title win from a historical standpoint was the most noteworthy event on the show. At 5'2" and 165 pounds, Oscar Gutierrez, 31, is by far the smallest man to ever hold a major world heavyweight title in the history of pro wrestling. The idea for him to win had been bounced around since the death of Eddie Guerrero in November, and the plan was for him to get it at some point this year. Mysterio was the plan after the Guerrero death, and then a change to Randy Orton. From the booking in recent weeks, it became clear since Mysterio was either beaten or if not beaten down by the top guys at almost every turn that he was going over. Most seemed to expect it, and I believe the booing in the crowd was probably people who fully expected him to win, but felt that Angle should retain. That's directly from the Observer. In hindsight, this does feel like, a bittersweet moment for Rey Mysterio. I mean, to this day, he's the greatest, luchador in American wrestling history. But just strip that away, probably one of the most exciting and dynamic performers ever in America. But because of the circumstance with Eddie's death and you turning back babyface and some changes with Randy Orton behind the scenes, and it's in Chicago and it's short, it was just a combination of things that led to this being less than ideal. Would that be fair to say?
I agree with all those concepts. I think that all affected Ray's run as champion, and the crowd just was into Kurt Angle, and there was nothing you could do about it. The match being short didn't help. All the changes they made throughout the schedule during the last 2 months before WrestleMania, Batista getting hurt, Eddie Guerrero passing in November, Randy getting the suspension, just a lot of things were occurring. And I think the writers came up with a good enough concept of keeping the program going. And I just feel badly that Rey Mysterio wasn't able to relish in the moment at WrestleMania with the crowd cheering for him. That's what he deserved.
Where would you rank this as, your WrestleMania matches? I mean, we've recently covered, your match with Shawn Michaels, and we also covered, we talked a little bit about your match with Eddie Guerrero, and we very recently, covered your other WrestleMania match, but with Brock Lesnar. Where would you put this one? Is this near the top of the list? Is it, where does this one fall? I mean, it is a big moment for a great friend of yours, but it's not the last match, and it is short, and it didn't exactly get the desired result. I mean, it's not the Baron Corbin match, but where does this one fall?
Well, it's not my top 5, and it has a lot to do with time issues. Only going 9 minutes for a main event of WrestleMania. That's very difficult. And I just think that we kind of robbed ourselves of a very special match. It could have been extremely good match, 5-star match, if we would have had the right amount of time. Due to Ray's entrance and not the office not giving us the 25-30 minutes. And I think it was because it was a triple threat match and they were expecting more action and for it to be shorter. But I think that we should have had 25-30 minutes for the match. I think that the crowd would eventually came for Ray if that was the case.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.